What would you do if your own sister stood up on your wedding day, not to cheer, but to shame you? That's what happened to me. But what she didn't know was that her insult would trigger a reveal so devastating it would silence an entire chapel and fracture the lies she'd built her life upon. My name is Grace Whitmore, and for most of my life, I was the sensible one. The quiet girl, the reliable sister, the teacher. And Candace was a storm in designer heels. Growing up in a small New Hampshire town, we shared everything a bedroom secret's late-night whispers about our futures. She used to trace her finger along the cracks in our bedroom ceiling and say, "One day I'll live in a place where the walls are perfect." I always said, "I just want peace." We were different even then. Candace dreamed of spotlights. I dreamed of libraries. She wanted yachts and champagne. I wanted quiet mornings and meaningful work, but somehow it never felt like a competition, not until it did. I still remember the first time I saw the shift. We were 17, sitting at our grandmother's kitchen table. The acceptance letters had come in. She got into NYU. I got into Princeton. That should have been a moment to celebrate together. But instead, Candace blinked at my letter and said, "Princeton, huh? That's impressive. For someone who doesn't even care about prestige." I laughed nervously. I just liked their English program. She smiled a tight, glossy smile. "Sure, but imagine if you tried a little harder, you could have had it all." From that day on, our paths diverged with sharpness. Hers shot straight into Wall Street cocktail hours and European getaways. Mine into classrooms, school budgets, and chipped mugs filled with strong coffee. She married Brandon hedge fund manager, tailored suits 10 years older. The Whitmore family treated it like we'd been knighted. I still remember my father whispering at her wedding, "She did it. She made it out." I stood by the punch bowl, clutching my gift envelope, pretending not to hear, but I did. That whisper stayed with me. It echoed every time Candace made one of her signature digs disguised as compliments. "You're still driving the Camry. It's so humble. You live so simply. It's inspiring, really." I smiled every time, nodded, sipped my water with lemon, never once fired back. But inside, I was keeping score, not out of spite, but out of a quiet building recognition that I wasn't invisible. I was just being overlooked. And that made me dangerous in a way Candace would never see coming. Because while she judged me for choosing smallness, I was building something she'd never understand, a life rooted in truth. Then came Daniel. I met him on a rainy Thursday at a cozy Italian restaurant just outside Boston. He was managing the floor, wiping down tables, greeting every customer like an old friend. When I spilled soda on my skirt, he didn't blink, just offered me extra napkins and a warm laugh. We talked for 2 hours after I finished my pasta. By the second date, I knew. He was steady, gentle, smart in the way that mattered, not flashy, but deeply grounded. I told Candace a month later. I still remember the way her mouth twisted when I said he's a restaurant manager. A manager like at Chili's. "No," I said, "it's a beautiful little place in Cambridge. Cozy. He runs the whole operation." She took a long sip of wine, then smirked. "Well, I hope he's passionate about lasagna." I felt my cheeks flush, but I didn't flinch. Because here's the thing, Daniel wasn't just managing that restaurant. He was Daniel Rafael Rivera, son of the late Rafael Rivera, founder of Rivera Hospitality Group, a quiet empire of restaurants, luxury hotels, and private dining clubs stretching across the East Coast. But we didn't tell anyone, not even my mother. Why? Because Daniel made a promise to his father on his deathbed. "I won't run a business I don't understand from the inside out. I'll start from the bottom, learn every job, and when I finally lead, I'll lead with humility." So he walked away from a corner office and picked up a grease-stained apron. No name tags, no LinkedIn titles, just real work. That's the man I fell in love with. That's the man I chose to marry. And that's the man Candace tried to humiliate publicly at the altar. The morning of our wedding was crisp golden early October in Vermont. We'd chosen a small chapel tucked between tall pines surrounded by warm-colored leaves. The pews were oak. The music was soft organ, every detail intentional, not grand, just us. I stood in the bridal suite veil, pinned, watching my reflection. My mother adjusted the curls behind my ear, her hands trembling slightly. "You look beautiful," she whispered. "And ready," I replied, trying not to cry, because everything in me felt full, not nervous, not unsure, whole. Daniel was waiting at the altar, and I was about to become his wife. I thought the hard part was over. But then, the chapel doors opened. The chapel was bathed in warm, light sunlight, filtering through stained glass, casting reds and golds across white oak pews. Daniel stood at the altar, eyes steady, hands folded, calm, just like always. The organ faded into silence as the pastor lifted his book. "If anyone here objects to this union, speak now or forever, hold your peace." And that's when I heard it. Click, 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 heels, sharp, measured, echoing down the stone aisle like a gavel in a courtroom. I didn't need to look. I knew that rhythm. Candace. She rose like royalty, her silk navy dress catching the light posture perfect, every move choreographed. And then she said it, loud enough for the back row to hear. "This is insane. You're making a mistake, Grace." Gasps. Somewhere someone dropped a program. Someone else coughed in disbelief. My father's mouth opened, but no sound came. Candace stepped further into the aisle. "You're throwing your life away." "On him," she pointed. Actually pointed. "He's a waiter, Grace. A waiter. You graduated top of your class. You could have had anyone, and you're marrying someone who spends his days cleaning crumbs off cheap tablecloths." She shook her head like I was the one embarrassing her. "I can't sit here and pretend this is okay." I didn't move. Neither did Daniel. He just squeezed my hand, a gentle pulse, a heartbeat. I turned to her. My voice didn't rise. My posture didn't shake. I simply said, "I'm marrying a man who knows what loyalty looks like. A man who treats people with dignity. That's not something money can buy." My father stood abruptly. "Candace, sit down." But she didn't. She turned to the crowd like she was addressing a courtroom. "I'm saying what everyone else is thinking. Don't come crying to me when you're clipping coupons in some shoebox apartment over a pizza joint." Murmurs rippled through the pews. And then Daniel did something only I could see. He leaned toward me slightly and mouthed, "Should we tell her?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Let her have her scene. Let her write her own downfall." Candace huffed, threw up her hands, and stormed back down the aisle like a queen in exile. The groan of the chapel doors behind her sounded like the end of an era. The pastor cleared his throat. "Shall we continue?" I turned to Daniel, smiled gently, and said, "Yes, please." The rest of the ceremony unfolded like a slow exhale. Without her presence, the air felt warmer, the vows deeper, the silence between the words more sacred. When we walked back down the aisle, hands clasped, there was a different energy in the room, not just celebration, anticipation. People knew what Candace had said. They'd seen the scene, but they didn't know what was coming next. And neither did she. Outside, the breeze lifted my veil just enough to catch the scent of pine. Guests tossed dried lavender. Laughter bubbled awkward but grateful. My cousin leaned in and whispered, "That was something." Daniel opened the door to the vintage Rolls-Royce waiting by the chapel. "Nice rental," I joked. He smirked. "From my personal collection." I blinked. "Seriously, might as well start the reveal with a purr," he said, stroking the walnut dashboard as the engine came to life. We slid into the leather seats, warm from the sun, and exhaled together. "Do you think she'll come to the reception?" I asked. He nodded without hesitation. "She won't be able to resist. She thinks she's won, but she doesn't know we're just getting started." As we pulled onto the winding road through the woods, the Vermont colors blazed around us, scarlet, amber, gold. "She has no idea what's waiting," I said. "But she will," Daniel replied. And with that, we drove toward the second act. The Rivera Grand Reserve wasn't just a venue, it was a statement. Perched atop a quiet bluff outside Boston, its limestone walls gleamed gold in the late afternoon sun. The building looked like it had been carved out of old European pride-arched windows, wrought iron balconies, and ivy trailing across marble pillars. Most people in our circles had heard of it, but very few had ever been inside. You didn't book the Rivera Grand. You were invited, or more accurately, vetted. That afternoon, the entire property was closed to the public, reserved entirely for us. As our Rolls-Royce pulled into the long, circular driveway, I could already hear the whispers. Wait, is this really where the reception is? This place is like Michelin star exclusive, right? How did they even get this? Did they win some kind of contest? Daniel smiled as he helped me out of the car, his tuck's perfectly pressed posture as relaxed as ever, but I could see it in his eyes. He was ready, not to gloat, not to humiliate, but to finally gently take off the mask. The doorman opened the massive glass doors with silent precision. Inside, the air was chilled and fragrant, rosemary, citrus, something floral I couldn't name. The floors gleamed marble white. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen galaxies above us. Servers in white gloves moved like shadows between silk-clad guests balancing flutes of golden champagne and trays of hors d'oeuvres that looked like art. And then, she arrived. Candace. 20 minutes late. Of course. She stepped through the entrance like she owned the place, pausing just past the threshold as her eyes scanned the space. The confusion on her face was instant and delicious. Her brows pinched, her lips parted. She looked around like someone had handed her the wrong script. This must be a mistake, she muttered loud enough for nearby guests to hear. They don't host weddings here. It's not even listed publicly. She spotted me across the room and beelined with forced poise. Grace, she said, that familiar tight smile on her lips. Sweetheart, what is this? Did someone pull some strings? Before I could respond, Daniel stepped beside me. No strings, he said evenly. Just family. Candace blinked at him like he'd materialized from nowhere. I thought you worked at Trattoria De Luca. I did. Still do sometimes. Great kitchen. Learned a lot there. So, this place, she asked, already shrinking slightly. Daniel gestured calmly. This is the Rivera Grand. Part of my family's portfolio. It didn't land right away. You could see her mind doing somersaults, searching for an angle that made sense. And then her face paled. Wait. Rivera. As in Rivera Hospitality Group. Before Daniel could confirm, a new voice entered the space. Daniel. Everyone turned. An older gentleman approached Kane, tapping gently, navy three-piece suit pristine. His silver hair glowed under the chandelier light. He walked like he owned the marble beneath his feet. And in a way, he did. Alfonso Rivera, founder, patriarch, legend. Grandfather Daniel said, stepping forward with a rare grin. They embraced firm, respectful. And then Alfonso turned to me, kissed my cheek, and whispered, So, this is the woman who finally convinced my grandson to stop hiding in kitchens. He turned last to Candace. His smile cooled instantly. And you must be the sister. Candace stood frozen. I didn't know my grandson was just a server, I believe you said. Her eyes widened. A champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. No one moved to help. No one gasped. They were too busy watching. Candace opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I was just trying to protect her, she murmured. I thought you thought his job defined his worth, Alfonso said, cutting her off. It's a common mistake, but a shallow one. She stood there, cheeks flushing every inch of her expensive outfit, looking suddenly like paper-thin armor. And then Daniel stepped forward. Stay, he said softly. Eat. Dance. Be here. If you're willing to see people for who they are, not what they do. That line, simple as it was, sent a ripple through the room. Even some of our distant relatives blinked in stunned silence. Candace swallowed hard. After everything I said. That's exactly why Daniel replied gently. And for the first time in my life, I saw Candace. Truly unsure of herself. No script, no comeback, just stillness. I stepped beside Daniel, wrapped my arm around his, and nodded toward the reception hall. "Shall we?" I whispered. He smiled. And as we walked, I looked over my shoulder. Candace stood alone, posture-cracked eyes, glossy heels suddenly too high for the floor beneath her. And that was only the beginning of the reckoning. 10 months passed, long enough for the gossip to die down, long enough for the social media posts to fade, long enough for everyone to forget what Candace said at the altar. Everyone except her and us. Daniel and I had settled into our life like a well-worn coat, comfortable, intentional. Despite his inheritance, we chose to live simply a modest brownstone near Boston Harbor ivy on the bricks windows that caught the golden hour just right. He spent his days moving through Rivera properties, not as a CEO perched in a glass tower, but as a presence. He shook hands with vendors, taught line cooks how to sear duck breast, asked dishwashers how their kids were doing. He was never interested in status, only service. And I kept teaching. My classroom was still filled with chipped desks and Sharpie graffiti, but I loved it. I taught the kids who didn't always get heard, who didn't see themselves in Shakespeare or Steinbeck until I showed them they were in every single line. We lived quietly, but underneath that quiet, we both sensed it. Candace hadn't spoken her last word. It happened on a Thursday night, 11:40 p.m. The rain outside was relentless, tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. Daniel and I were curled up on the couch, his laptop glowing faintly, the last of our tea, cooling on the coffee table. And then a knock. Not a text. Not a call. Just a knock. I opened the door and saw her. Candace, hair soaked, mascara streaked, one stiletto in her hand, the other still on her foot. She looked like a woman who'd run through a storm and lost a war along the way. They're taking everything she whispered, the house, the car. Brandon's under federal investigation, insider trading, fraud. Her voice cracked on that last word, not from shame, from shock, like she still couldn't believe it was real. Daniel appeared behind me silent, his expression unreadable. We didn't say anything, just stepped aside. She entered the living room like a guest in her own memory, awkward, stiff, unsure of the furniture. "I don't know what to do," she said, hands clenched in her lap. "I've never started over." Her voice broke again, this time softer, smaller. Daniel closed his laptop and leaned forward. "There's an apartment above one of our smaller restaurants in Cambridge. It's clean, safe, simple." She looked at him stunned. "You'd let me stay there." I sat down beside her, calm, clear, on one condition. She tensed. "You work," I said. "Not in an office, not behind a desk. You do what Daniel did. You start where he started. You want me to wait tables." "Worse," I said, not unkindly. "Dish pit, prep line, mop, cut your own lemons." Her eyes widened like I'd just slapped her. But I wasn't trying to punish her. I was offering her something no one in our family had ever offered her before, a way out that required honesty. She stared at me for a long time. Then, "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it. I don't know how to be good at anything real." Daniel stood offering a hand. "You'll learn," he said. We all did. She moved into the apartment a week later. 2 suitcases. No assistant, no housekeeper, no pre-approved furniture delivery. On her first shift, she dropped a tray of glasses, shattering 8 of them, then fled to the walk-in freezer and cried until her mascara left black streaks on the lettuce bins. But she came back the next day, and the day after that. No one clapped. No one gave her gold stars. But the sous chef noticed she stayed late to clean the grill. The host noticed she started learning the regulars' names. And the dishwasher, a 17-year-old kid named Malik, noticed that she always brought extra gloves without being asked. Humility doesn't arrive with thunder. It seeps in, quiet and persistent until you stop checking mirrors and start looking people in the eye. And slowly, Candace started to change. But she still didn't know the full story, because buried in her husband's laptop left behind after his arrest was a folder labeled Backup, NYC, inside emails, voice memos, one, to her, a voice recording from Brandon. If Grace marries into that Rivera family, everything changes. You think they'll let her stay small? She'll outshine you, outmaneuver you. Just say something. Ruin it before it gets too far. Candace sat on the apartment floor that night, earbuds in phone, trembling. He hadn't just manipulated the markets. He'd manipulated her. Pushed her to sabotage her own sister's happiness, not because of concern, but out of control. The next morning, Candace showed up to the restaurant early, hair pulled back, apron already on, not a trace of gloss. And she worked, not for redemption, not for forgiveness, but because she finally understood the cost of pride. 6 months later, I visited the Cambridge location just before the dinner rush. It was a Friday. The air smelled like rosemary and garlic butter. Pans clattered. Orders flew. The kitchen buzzed with the kind of focused chaos that only happens when everyone knows their role and trusts each other to play it well. And there, at the pass, was Candace. Hair pulled into a tight bun, apron slightly stained, pen tucked behind her ear. Her once manicured hands now bore the signs of real labor burns, calluses, a small scar above her knuckle. But she moved like she belonged. Fire table 12, swap the veal to halibut, and someone please check the temperature on the creme brulee. I'm not serving soup in a ramekin. The kitchen responded not with sarcasm, not with eye rolls, but with respect. She noticed me just as she wiped her hands on a towel. Her face softened. "You came early," she said. "Wanted to see you in action." She smiled genuinely, not the old performative smile, not the one she wore to galas and fundraisers. This one was quiet, earned. "Give me 5 minutes to close out the orders," she said. "Then I'm yours." I sat at a side booth and watched. I watched as Candace trained a new server how to de-escalate a difficult table without losing her cool. I watched her slip a free appetizer to a single mom and her toddler in the corner. I watched her stay behind to mop a spill she didn't cause because the busboy was running behind. She wasn't playing a role. She was being someone new. Daniel slid into the booth beside me, arms folded, watching her too. "They trust her," he said softly. "She's earned it." After her shift, we pulled her into the corner booth with us. Daniel took a breath. "So, how would you feel about managing this place?" Candace blinked. "Me. You know the system, the people, the work, but—" "I dropped a tray my first day, and you came back the next," I said. "That's the part that matters." She stared at us, emotion rising in her throat. "I never thought I'd love this, but I do. I love the rhythm, the honesty, the realness of it." She glanced down at her hands. "You know, I used to think success meant being admired, having people talk about you like you were special. But now I get it." She looked up. Her eyes were glassy. "Now I know success is being respected for who you are, not what you wear." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You built this, and it suits you." 2 months later, she stood in front of the staff for her first manager's meeting. Her posture was solid. Her tone was clear. "We do things right. We do things fair. And no job is too small, not even for me." And no one laughed. Not even the cynical pastry chef. At the next family gathering, a fall dinner at my aunt's house, Candace showed up wearing her Rivera uniform. Black button-down black jeans, her name tag clipped to her pocket. No designer dress. No glossy curls. No air of performance. And for the first time, no one commented on it. Because it wasn't a costume. It was armor, earned in sweat, silence, and second chances. She helped in the kitchen, washed dishes without being asked, sat beside our youngest cousin and asked about their college essays. And when my mother hugged her at the end of the night, there was no awkward tension. Just two women learning how to love each other again without conditions. Later, as we stood by the coat rack, I leaned in. "You proud of yourself?" I asked. She smiled. This time, no hesitation. "I finally feel like myself." And I didn't even know who that was until I lost everything. 1 year later, I stood outside a renovated storefront in Somerville, Massachusetts. The brick facade had been repointed, the windows replaced the Rivera logo etched tastefully in gold across the glass. Above the door hung a bold white banner. "Grand opening, Rivera Local Somerville inside." Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. A small jazz trio played in the corner. Local press hovered near the bar, snapping photos of the staff. And in the center of it, all wearing a crisp black apron and a calm, focused smile, was Candace. Not Candace the socialite, not Candace the scene stealer, not Candace the whispering sister with wine-stained lips. This was a new woman, one rebuilt from sweat scars and second chances. When she spotted me, her whole face lit up. "You came," she said, breathless. "Wouldn't miss it." She took my hand and led me to the open kitchen window. Inside, a crew of young cooks hustled under hanging copper pans, and on the pass sat 3 elegant dishes locally sourced, beautifully plated, entirely hers. "I built the menu with the team," she said. "Everything's under $30. I wanted something working families could actually enjoy." I turned to her. "You thought of them first." She nodded. "Daniel taught me that. You don't build a legacy by climbing over people. You build it by lifting people with you." At 7 p.m., Sharp Daniel and I stood beside her under the banner. A small crowd had gathered, friends, staff, neighbors, former teachers, a few reporters, even the sous chef from her first restaurant job. She stepped forward, cleared her throat, and held the ceremonial ribbon in both hands. 1 year ago, she began, "I lost everything I thought defined me, my house, my husband, my comfort. But what I found was something more valuable. I found honesty. I found the dignity of showing up. I found the people who gave me room to fail and the courage to try again." She paused, searching the crowd until her eyes landed on me. And I found my sister again. My throat tightened. "Grace, you gave me a lifeline when I least deserved it. You didn't shame me. You offered me work, real work. And through that, you gave me back myself." She turned to the ribbon, lifted the scissors, and paused. "Come cut it with me." I blinked. "Me?" "Of course," she said. "I wouldn't be standing here without you." So we did it together. One smooth snip, one loud cheer, and just like that, Candace Whitmore opened the doors to a restaurant not built on pretense or privilege, but on humility, on earned respect, on the ashes of a life once built to impress. As the night unfolded, I watched her move with ease between tables, joking with chefs, refilling drinks, hugging regulars from her Cambridge days who came just to see her fly. My mother pulled me aside at one point, tears rimmed in her eyes. "I didn't think she could change," she said, "but I'm so glad she did. She didn't just change," I whispered. "She chose to." Later, as the crowd thinned and the jazz trio packed up their instruments, Candace joined us at the back patio with 3 glasses of wine, one for me, one for Daniel, and one for her. She raised hers. "To second chances," she said, "and to sisters who never stopped believing, even when they had every right to walk away." We clinked glasses under the string lights, and for the first time since we were kids, lying on that creaky bunk bed in our grandmother's attic, I saw her again, my sister. Not the perfect version, not the polished one, just her. Raw, real, redeemed. Closing, reflection, and call to action. Some stories of betrayal end in silence, some in war. But mine ended with a ribbon, a restaurant, and a sister, reborn in Flower and Fire. So now I ask you, have you ever been underestimated by the people who were supposed to know you best? Have you ever had to let someone fall before they could stand? Tell your story in the comments. Let's lift each other messy, honest, and unfiltered. And if this story resonated with you, like, subscribe, and stay for the next one, because behind every perfect photo is a story someone tried to hide. What would you do if the man you loved stole $50,000 from you and smiled while doing it? My name's Elena Carter. I'm 34 years old and I work in cybersecurity out of Austin, Texas. Most days, my life is governed by quiet logic, network architecture, encrypted systems, fraud detection tools. I'm the kind of woman who backs up her backups and sleeps with a hard drive under the bed. But nothing in my professional training prepared me for the biggest breach of trust I'd ever face my own husband. His name is Ethan Carter, and he was the kind of man who made chaos look like charisma. Tall, confident, dangerously smooth. He walked into every room like the world owed him something, and more often than not, people believed it did. When we met, I was drawn in like everyone else. He spoke in dreams and promises plans for a business world travel passion projects that always seemed just one investor away. Meanwhile, I was grinding my way up in tech running simulations, securing financial networks, and keeping a steady paycheck flowing into our shared account. Looking back now, I realize I ignored every warning sign. The vague bank statements, the misplaced receipts, the sudden disappearances always followed by grand emotional apologies. But the real betrayal, the one that ended it all, came wrapped in Italian leather and arrogance. It was a Friday afternoon when he returned. The front door swung open, and there he was, grinning like a kid who'd just won a game no one else knew they were playing. He tossed his sunglasses onto the coffee table and stood in the center of the living room, radiating smugness, in a freshly pressed suit and pristine designer shoes. His luggage spilled open on the floor, bursting with luxury logos, Gucci, Montblanc, Berluti. He looked like a walking billboard for bad decisions. "Thanks for the upgrade, my dear," Ethan said with a wink. "First class to Europe. Private terrace suite in the Marais. You really outdid yourself this time." I blinked. Then I laughed, not nervously, not out of shock. I laughed like a woman who had already filed the paperwork and poured the wine. Ethan's smile faltered. "What's so funny?" he asked, confusion creeping into his voice. "Oh, Ethan," I said, shaking my head. "You really have no idea what you've done, do you?" He frowned, cocking his head like a confused puppy. "You're not mad, I echoed. "Why would I be mad? You got exactly what you wanted. The trip, the watch, the fantasy." I leaned casually against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. My heart wasn't pounding. My palms weren't sweating. I felt calm, eerily calm. Because this wasn't some emotional ambush. This was the execution of a plan 7 days in the making, and he had walked right into it. Ethan kicked off his shoes like he was the king of Versailles. "Seriously, though, you should have told me about that card ages ago. Imagine what we could have done together." I stared at him speechless for a moment anyway. Not because of what he said, but because of how casually he said it. Like $50,000 meant nothing. Like he hadn't violated the very foundation of our marriage. But instead of screaming, I just tilted my head. "How exactly did you think this was going to end?" He laughed. "You've always been uptight about money, Lena. It's not like you couldn't afford it. You're killing it at work. I figured you'd get over it, once you saw how happy it made me." Happy. That was his justification for draining a credit card tied to a program he knew nothing about. What Ethan didn't realize was that the card he used wasn't a personal card. It was part of a corporate fraud simulation tied directly to a federal detection system. I'd created it, monitored it, trained entire teams on how to track it. Every purchase he made, from the $1 $200 dinner in Paris to the $9,000 timepiece, was logged, time-stamped, and reported. The fool had no idea he wasn't a mastermind. He was a case study, and I was the author. He thought he'd scored the ultimate luxury hack, but while he was sipping champagne in Paris, I was quietly watching the walls close in. He thought I was asleep, but I'd spent my career preparing for this exact kind of breach. It was 2:07 a.m. when it happened. The house was silent, the kind of silence that feels thick in your ears. I'd gone to bed early after a long day at the office, but years in cybersecurity had trained my body to sense when something was off. I didn't hear a door slam or a creaky floorboard. What I noticed was the absence of sound, the pause before a mistake. Downstairs, Ethan was creeping like a teenager past curfew. He thought I was out cold. He always underestimated how deeply I was wired to notice patterns. And the second I checked the motion-triggered camera I'd installed in the hallway, ostensibly to monitor our elderly cat, I saw him, barefoot, shirtless, hovering over my laptop. My laptop, which I never left out unless I wanted someone to find it. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I simply watched. On screen, he opened the browser and navigated with practiced familiarity to my banking portal. I watched him snap pictures of my credit card information, card numbers, security code, expiration date, all of it. Then he softly closed the lid and tiptoed back up the stairs like a thief proud of his stealth. What he didn't know was that everything he just did triggered a chain reaction. Because that wasn't a real card. It was a sandbox training asset, a dummy card connected to my company's fraud detection simulation. I used it in monthly corporate workshops to teach employees how to handle internal breaches. And Ethan, my smug, reckless husband, had just become Exhibit A. The next morning, I played it cool. I made coffee, smiled like always, kissed his cheek on my way to work. Then I checked my phone. Fraud alert. 4800 high-end menswear boutique in downtown Paris. $1,260 Michelin star tasting menu in Le Marais. $7,400 business class upgrade and champagne package. The notifications kept coming, each one a red flag Ethan had gift-wrapped for me. But I didn't panic. I just smiled. By noon, I'd compiled the first 24 charges into a neat digital folder. I looped in my longtime friend and attorney, Chloe Bennett, with one short message. He took the bait. Want to grab coffee? When we met at our usual cafe downtown, I laid it all out. Chloe didn't even try to hide her grin. Wait, hold up, she said, nearly choking on her cappuccino. He used the fraud trap card, the one that pings federal monitors every time someone breathes near it. Yep, I said calmly, stirring my coffee. And he thinks he's a criminal mastermind. Chloe let out a bark of laughter. This is gold. I mean, you always did say his ego would be his downfall. He left this morning, I added, just a note on the counter. Taking time for myself. Don't wait up. Let me guess, Chloe said, leaning back. He's using your card to treat himself to a week of pretending he's royalty. I nodded. And every charge is setting off alarm bells in 3 states. We shared a long look, the kind only 2 women can share when a trap has been set, bait taken, and consequences are en route. That night, I sat alone on the couch with my laptop. I didn't cry, I didn't drink, I didn't vent on a group chat. I simply watched Ethan live his best life, on borrowed time. $11,000 5-star hotel in the Latin Quarter, $2,900 bespoke shoes, $200 watch boutique known for black market resale. Each transaction confirmed it. He wasn't impulsive. He was entitled. Entitled enough to think I wouldn't notice. Entitled enough to believe I'd never fight back. But I wasn't planning to just fight. I was planning to document, expose, and dismantle everything he'd built on lies. He thought he was living the dream. I was building the case that would turn it into a nightmare. By the 3rd day of Ethan's European fantasy tour, his arrogance was in full bloom. He texted me photos, yes, actual photos from his hotel suite, lavish breakfast trays, velvet-lined watch boxes, a selfie in front of the Eiffel Tower with the caption, "We should do this more often, XOE." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded everything to Chloe and our newest contact agent, Marcus Keller, a federal investigator specializing in digital financial crimes. He'd worked with my firm on previous fraud audits, and he knew my credentials well. When I told him the situation, I half expected him to think I was exaggerating. But once I shared the logs and transaction reports, his response was swift and borderline amused. "You're telling me..." He used a simulated fraud training card monitored by a federal-backed detection system to steal from you, and he thinks he's gotten away with it. Exactly, I said, scrolling through Ethan's Instagram story where he'd just tagged himself in a rooftop champagne tasting. He's bragging like this is Ocean's 11. Agent Keller let out a low whistle. Normally, we chase leads for months, but this This one's writing itself. Over the next 2 days, we built the perfect digital dossier. Every transaction from the dummy card was automatically logged with timestamps, GPS data, merchant IDs, and surveillance triggers. That's how the training program worked. It mimicked real-life fraud detection in real time, and Ethan was practically begging to be caught. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted his own words. So when he strutted back through our front door that Friday evening, bronzed and beaming, trailing his suitcase full of stolen splendor, I let him talk, and talk, and talk. Paris was magic, he said, throwing himself dramatically onto the couch. The food, the people, the vibe. You should have come. I smiled subtle. Tell me everything. He did. He told me about the rooftop terrace with heated tiles, the wristwatch boutique where the clerk treated him like royalty, the hidden jazz club where he dropped $3,000 on rare scotch for a friend. Every sentence was a confession. And while he talked, my phone resting silently on the kitchen counter recorded every word. You should have told me about that card sooner, Ethan said, waving his wrist like a peacock flaunting feathers. It made me feel seen. I sipped my wine, nodding. Must have felt amazing. He grinned like a teenager. The best part? No one suspected a thing, not even you. I raised an eyebrow. He took my silence as admiration. He didn't realize it was calculation. That night, I sent the full recording to Chloe. Her response came within seconds. Perfect. We've got voice visuals, transaction logs, and federal backing. Let's move. The next morning, Chloe and I met for coffee to finalize the timeline. She came dressed like she was going into battle blazer, sharp phone in hand, eyes on fire. He's toast, she said without preamble. You've got more evidence than most corporate embezzlement cases I've seen. I want him to walk into it, I said quietly. No heads up, no confrontation, just a knock on the door. Chloe nodded. Agent Keller agrees. They're coordinating with local police for an in-home pickup. The more confident Ethan feels, the deeper the fall. I exhaled. Years of manipulation excuses emotional withdrawal, and now this man would finally feel what it was like to be held accountable. That night, Ethan lounged in the living room again, scrolling through his phone like nothing in the world could touch him. He was playing some mindless game, humming a song he probably thought made him look carefree. He had no idea. I stood in the hallway just out of sight, watching the back of his head and listening to the buzz of the TV. The weight in my chest wasn't grief. It wasn't fear. It was liberation. I pulled out my phone and texted Chloe 2 words, ready now. He thought he owned the room until the badge came out. That was the moment his fantasy finally collapsed. It was just after 6 p.m. when the knock came. 3 sharp measured taps at the front door. Calm. Official. I already knew who it was. I rose from the couch, took one last sip of tea, and opened the door. Standing on the porch were Agent Keller in a dark suit and 2 uniformed officers from Austin PD. No drama, no flashing lights, just quiet federal precision. Good evening, Miss Carter. Agent Keller said, his tone professional but warm. Is Ethan home? I nodded, stepping aside. He's right inside. Feel free to make yourselves comfortable. They entered without hesitation. Behind me, I heard the gentle click of holsters, the quiet shuffle of boots on tile. The atmosphere in the room shifted, thickening with the realization that something was deeply wrong. Ethan looked up from the couch, blinking, confused, then defensive. What's going on? He asked, sitting up straighter, as if posture alone could save him. Agent Keller stepped forward, unbothered. Ethan Carter, you are under investigation for multiple counts of credit card fraud and unauthorized use of financial accounts. We'd like you to come with us for questioning. The air went still. Ethan's smug grin collapsed. Wait, what? No, this has to be a mistake. He turned to me desperate. Elena, say something. This is crazy. I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall with measured calm. I don't know, Ethan. You've been awfully busy lately. Maybe you should explain it to them. The officers approached. Ethan stood up fast, palms out. Hold on, you can't do this. This is my house. She's my wife. Aren't you supposed to stand by me? I didn't blink. Funny. I thought husbands weren't supposed to steal from their wives. Guess we're both learning new things today. His face flushed red, then pale. His voice cracked under the pressure. You set me up. No, Ethan, I said quietly. You set yourself up. I just let you. As they read him his rights and placed cuffs around his wrists, Ethan kept twisting toward me, still trying to bargain, still clinging to the fantasy that charm could save him. You won't get away with this, he hissed. I smiled, cool and steady. Oh, Ethan, I already have. The door closed behind them with a crisp click, leaving behind nothing but silence and the faint smell of expensive cologne still lingering in the air. For a long moment, I stood alone in the living room, staring at the space where he'd been. His duffel bag sat open on the rug, luxury items spilling out like confetti after a party no one enjoyed. And then, peace. Real, bone-deep peace. Not the kind you beg for. The kind you build one decision, one boundary, one hard-won truth at a time. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Chloe. He's in the interrogation room now, already spinning a sob story. You were right, he's claiming you gave him permission. I laughed. Of course he is. But don't worry, Chloe added. Between the fraud alerts, the purchase trail, and that lovely recording of him bragging, he doesn't stand a chance. The next morning, Agent Keller called. His tone was calm, but even through the phone, I could hear the tight satisfaction behind his words. We've got everything we need, he said. Your husband, soon-to-be ex, I assume, admitted to using the card. He's claiming he didn't know it was linked to a fraud detection system. Typical, I said. When in doubt, blame your wife. Keller chuckled. We're moving forward with the charges, multiple counts of fraud and unauthorized financial use. Given the amount of money involved, he's looking at significant consequences. And thanks to the buyer protection triggers, your accounts will be reimbursed in full. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. After all the manipulation, the excuses, the gaslighting, I wasn't just cleared, I was vindicated. His world didn't just collapse in court, it shattered in every room he once ruled. The fallout came faster than I expected. It started with whispers, then texts, then silence. By the end of the week, Ethan's life had been reduced to unanswered calls, frozen accounts, and one very public mugshot, the kind that circulates just enough for the people who matter to see it. His designer purchases confiscated. The flights he'd booked for future business trips canceled. His bank accounts flagged and locked. Apparently, the same charm he used to manipulate me didn't work on fraud investigators. And the woman I'd always quietly suspected, he was seeing behind my back Nicole, a digital marketer with a Chanel obsession and zero subtlety. She dropped him the second she saw the headlines. According to one of Ethan's mutual friends, Nicole's exact words were, I liked expensive, not indicted. I didn't even flinch. A few days later, my phone rang. The number wasn't saved. Out of curiosity, I answered and immediately regretted it. Elena Ethan's voice cracked through the line, low and frayed. I need to talk to you. I stared out the window, watching the golden afternoon light paint stripes across my floor. I didn't speak. Elena, please. I messed up. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just what I cut in ice behind every syllable. Just planning to steal $50,000 from your wife and hope she wouldn't notice. Just banking on my silence. There was a long pause on the other end, and then softly, I thought you loved me. My breath caught. I did, I said. I loved the man I thought you were, not the one who smiled while stealing from me. And with that, I hung up. A week later, Chloe called with the final update. He took the plea deal, she said. No jail time, but he has to pay every penny back and perform over 400 hours of community service. Oh, and his credit is officially a burning trash heap. Poetic, I murmured. He's banned from opening new financial accounts without direct approval for the next 5 years, she added. Honestly, I've seen white-collar criminals get off easier, but you played this perfectly. I leaned back on the couch, absorbing the finality of it all. No rage, no panic, just closure. For years, I'd believed Ethan was the one holding things together with his big plans, flashy charm, and wild ideas. Now I could see clearly. I was the foundation. He was just dead weight. The day the divorce papers arrived, I didn't cry. I poured a glass of wine curled up on the couch and opened the envelope like it was a permission slip to start over. The apartment was quiet now. No more late-night rants about his next big thing. No more scattered receipts or impulse-purchased business investments. Just me, a candle burning on the windowsill, and a newfound sense of peace. I looked around at the space that finally felt like mine. The kitchen I could organize how I wanted. The playlist that didn't get interrupted by his vibe checks. The closet that no longer smelled like overpriced cologne and failure. I thought about the moment he'd come home from Paris, drunk on ego, dripping in stolen labels, bragging about the upgrade I'd apparently gifted him. And I smiled, because the real upgrade was him being gone. Teaser. But this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of something better. Something Elena had never allowed herself to imagine. He took the lies, the money, and the spotlight. I kept the truth and walked away free. The first few days after the divorce were still. Not quiet in a hollow way, quiet in a liberating way. The apartment felt different, brighter, like someone had pulled back a heavy curtain I didn't even know was there. Ethan's stuff was gone, what little he hadn't sold or crammed into his duffel bag on his way to infamy. No more clutter, no more chaos. Just me. My playlists, my favorite mug, and the kind of peace you don't realize you've been craving until you finally taste it. Chloe stopped by that week, dropping off the last of the settlement paperwork. She kicked off her heels, flopped onto the couch, and took a long sip of the espresso I handed her. "How are you feeling?" she asked, watching me closely. I thought about it. Strangely good. Like I finally opened the windows in my life and let all the smoke out. She smirked. "That's because you didn't just get out, Elena. You got out clean." He left with a criminal record, a mountain of debt, and a reputation no PR firm could fix. I didn't even need to raise my voice, I said, almost marveling at it. "You raised something better," she said. "Your standards." That weekend I started redecorating. Nothing major, just reclaiming the space. A new coat of paint in the hallway. Soft blues, earthy tones. I changed the lighting, swapped out our old couch for a sleek velvet one I'd been eyeing for years, back when I used to talk myself out of things because Ethan might not like it. Funny how many decisions I used to make for his comfort, not mine. I booked a solo vacation to Oregon, just me, a hiking trail, and the sound of river water cutting through pine trees. For the first time in forever, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. I didn't need permission. I didn't need to ask. I just went. Ethan tried to reach out a few more times, a half-baked email apology, a message passed through a mutual acquaintance, even a clumsy letter in the mail claiming he'd changed. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. What was left to say, he had made his choices, and I'd finally made mine. Some of our old friends tried to stay neutral. Others dropped me cold. But the ones who mattered stuck around, and more importantly, I didn't shrink myself for any of them. From what I heard, Ethan was bouncing between odd jobs. One friend told me he was working at a car dealership. Another said he moved back in with his parents in suburban Dallas. He was rebuilding, they said. I didn't care. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even curious. If anything, I was grateful. Because Ethan's betrayal had done something no therapy session or TED Talk ever could it force me to rebuild my life on my own terms. One night, a month later, I stood out on my balcony with a glass of wine. The city lights flickered below and a breeze moved gently through the trees. I was alone, but not lonely. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because someone told me I was, because I decided I was. I raised my glass to the stars. To me, I whispered, to the woman who saw it all coming and didn't flinch. Have you ever been underestimated by the person who claimed to love you, ever been dismissed, until you quietly flip the script, drop your story in the comments? I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this journey, Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to remember you don't need to scream to be powerful. Sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.